The sound of Matteo's desperate cries echoed through Romano's, the most exclusive Italian restaurant in Little Italy. Every head turned as Marco Sant'Angelo, the most feared man in New York, stood helplessly bouncing his 6-month-old son, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "Boss, maybe we should," his lieutenant started, but Marco's dark glare silenced him instantly. The baby's wails grew louder, more frantic. Marco's jaw clenched as he noticed the disapproving stares from nearby tables, the whispered conversations. His reputation, built on absolute control, was crumbling with every second his son remained inconsolable. Then she appeared, a young woman with tired eyes and gentle hands, wearing a coffee-stained apron that marked her as clearly out of place in this world of crystal glasses and silk ties. She moved through the restaurant like she belonged nowhere and everywhere at once. "Excuse me," Sofia whispered, her Brazilian accent soft but determined. "I think I can help." Marco's men tensed, hands moving instinctively toward concealed weapons. But something in her eyes, maternal, fearless, desperate, made Marco raise his hand to stop them. What happened next would change everything. Welcome to passion and power, where forbidden love meets dangerous desire. If this story already has your heart racing, imagine what's coming next. Comment below which city you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. We're building a community of romance lovers who aren't afraid of a little danger. Your support means everything to us. Now, let's dive into Sofia and Marco's unforgettable story. 3 hours earlier, Sofia Mendoza had been living her carefully constructed life of invisibility. At 24, she'd perfected the art of blending into the background, essential for an undocumented Brazilian immigrant trying to survive in New York City. The morning shift at Café Luna had been brutal. Her 8-month-old daughter, Luna, had kept her awake most of the night, teething and feverish. When her babysitter cancelled last minute, Sofia had no choice but to bring Luna to work, praying her boss wouldn't notice. "Sofia, table 6 needs their order," called Maria, the other waitress, shooting a worried glance toward the storage room where Luna slept in her carrier. Sofia nodded, smoothing her uniform and checking her reflection in the coffee machine's surface. Dark circles shadowed her brown eyes, and her black hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman running on empty, held together by determination and desperation. The café sat on the edge of Little Italy, caught between the gentrification creeping in from Soho and the old-world traditions that still ruled these narrow streets. Sofia had chosen this neighborhood deliberately. Among the Italian families and long-time residents, one more immigrant trying to make it didn't draw attention. But attention was exactly what she'd been avoiding for 2 years. She'd arrived in New York, pregnant and alone, fleeing a relationship that had turned violent when she'd refused to terminate her pregnancy. The tourist visa in her passport had long since expired, making her one of the millions living in the shadows of the American dream. "Mama's here, meu amor," she whispered to Luna during her break, settling into the cramped storage room that doubled as a makeshift nursery. Luna's tiny fist wrapped around Sofia's finger as she began to nurse, the familiar weight of her daughter grounding her in a world that often felt impossibly unstable. Through the thin walls, she could hear the dinner rush beginning. Café Luna might be small, but it sat directly next to Romano's, the most exclusive Italian restaurant in the neighborhood. The contrast was stark, their fluorescent lights and laminate tables versus Romano's crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths. Sofia had learned not to look too closely at the men who frequented Romano's, expensive suits, cold eyes, and an aura of danger that made smart people cross the street. She'd grown up in São Paulo. She recognized power when she saw it. Luna had just fallen asleep when the crying started. At first, Sofia thought it was her own daughter stirring, but Luna remained peaceful in her arms. The sound was coming from next door, a baby's desperate wails that seemed to pierce through the walls themselves. Sofia frowned, adjusting Luna in her carrier. The crying continued, growing more frantic. Every maternal instinct she possessed screamed at her to help, but she forced herself to stay put. Romano's wasn't her world, and she couldn't afford to make it her business. But the crying didn't stop. Minutes passed, then an hour. The sound was relentless, heartbreaking. Sophia found herself pacing the small storage room, Luna sleeping peacefully while another baby suffered just yards away. "I can't," she whispered to herself in Portuguese. "It's not my place." But when Luna stirred and began to fuss, responding to the other baby's distress, Sophia's resolve cracked. She'd always been too soft-hearted for her own good. It's what had gotten her into trouble with Luna's father, what had made her trust the wrong people, what had led her to this precarious life in a foreign country. But it was also what made her a good mother, what drove her to work double shifts to provide for her daughter, what gave her strength when everything else fell apart. The crying from Romanos reached a new pitch of desperation. Sophia closed her eyes, weighing her options. She could stay hidden, safe in her invisibility. Or she could do what every fiber of her being demanded, help a child in distress. The decision was never really in doubt. Sophia secured Luna in her carrier, checked her reflection one more time, and stepped out of the storage room. Maria looked up from wiping tables, her eyebrows raised in question. "I'll be right back," Sophia said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Where are you going?" Sophia gestured toward the wall separating them from Romanos. "There's a baby crying. I think I can help." Maria's face went pale. "Sophia, no. You don't understand what that place is. Those men, our fathers and sons and brothers," Sophia finished quietly. "And right now, one of them has a baby who needs help." Before Maria could protest further, Sophia pushed through the cafe's front door and walked the few steps to Romano's entrance. The maitre d' looked her up and down, taking in her coffee-stained apron and worn shoes with obvious disdain. "I'm sorry, miss, but we're fully booked." The baby's cries cut through his words, and Sophia's resolve hardened. "I'm not here to eat. There's a baby crying and I think I can help. Ma'am, I really must insist. Let her through." The voice that spoke was deep, commanding, and carried the weight of absolute authority. Sophia looked past the maitre d' to see a man approaching, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a white dress shirt with the top 4 buttons undone, revealing a muscular chest and a small, elegant tattoo on the side of his neck. A platinum Rolex caught the light as he moved, and his dark eyes held a mixture of desperation and dangerous intensity. This had to be the father. "You said you can help?" His accent carried traces of Italian, refined by generations in America, but never quite erased. Sophia nodded, her heart pounding as she took in the scene behind him. A table full of men in expensive suits, all looking uncomfortable and out of their element, and in the center of it all, a baby carrier holding an infant whose cries had reached a level of desperation that made Sophia's chest ache. "I'm a mother," she said simply. "Sometimes babies just need a woman's touch." Something flickered in his dark eyes. Hope, maybe, or recognition of a kindred desperation. He stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. "Marco Sant'Angelo," he said, extending his hand. "Sophia," she replied, not offering her last name. In her world, surnames were dangerous things. As she approached the crying baby, Sophia felt every eye in the restaurant on her, but all that mattered was the tiny face red with exhaustion and frustration, the little fists waving helplessly in the air. "Hello, beautiful," she whispered, her voice automatically shifting to the soft musical tone she used with Luna. "What's wrong, meu amor?" The moment Sophia's hands touched baby Matteo, something shifted in the restaurant's atmosphere. The infant's cries didn't stop immediately, but they changed, becoming less frantic, more questioning, as if he sensed something different about this new person. Sophia lifted him from the carrier with practiced ease, supporting his head and speaking in soft Portuguese. "Shh, pequeno, I know. The world is scary and loud, isn't it?" Marco watched, transfixed, as this stranger cradled his son with the kind of natural grace that had eluded every nanny he'd hired. Sophia swayed gently, her movements instinctive and soothing. "He's beautiful," she murmured, studying Matteo's face. "How old?" 6 months, Marco replied, his voice rougher than usual. "He's been like this for weeks. The doctors say nothing's wrong, but he cries anyway," Sophia finished, understanding in her eyes. "Sometimes babies carry sadness that isn't their own." The words hit Marco like a physical blow. Since Isabella's death, he'd been drowning in grief, anger, and a helplessness that no amount of power or money could fix. If this woman could see it so clearly, could Matteo sense it too? "When did you last eat, little one?" Sophia asked, checking Matteo's diaper with efficient movements. "And when did you last sleep properly?" "He won't take the bottle," Marco admitted, aware that his men were listening to every word. "We've tried everything. Different formulas, different bottles, different people feeding him. Nothing works." Sophia's expression grew thoughtful. She glanced around the restaurant, taking in the expensive decor, the uncomfortable-looking men at the table, the obvious wealth and power that surrounded them. Then her gaze returned to Marco, and he felt exposed under her scrutiny. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward an empty chair. Marco nodded, dismissing his men with a subtle gesture. They retreated to the bar, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to give the illusion of privacy. Sophia sat down, adjusting Matteo in her arms. "I have a daughter," she said quietly. 8 months old. She went through something similar when she was younger. What helped? Time, patience, and accepting that sometimes babies need more than we can give them alone. She looked up at him, her brown eyes serious. "When did you last sleep, Mr. Santangelo?" The question caught him off guard. "I don't see how that's relevant. Babies feel everything we feel. If you're exhausted, stressed, grieving, he knows they're like little emotional sponges." Sophia's voice was gentle but direct. "You can't pour from an empty cup." Marco's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being psychoanalyzed, especially not by a cafe waitress who'd appeared out of nowhere. But Matteo had stopped crying completely now, his dark eyes, so like Isabella's, fixed on Sophia's face with rapt attention. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said, but the words lacked heat. "Don't I?" Sophia shifted Matteo to her shoulder, patting his back with practiced rhythm. "I know what it's like to be alone with a baby, wondering if you're failing them every day. I know what it's like to be so tired you can barely think straight, but you keep going because you have to. And I know what it's like to carry grief so heavy it feels like it might crush you." Marco stared at her, this woman who'd walked into his world uninvited and somehow seen straight through every wall he'd built. "My wife died," he said finally, the words scraping his throat raw. "I'm sorry." Sophia's voice was soft with genuine sympathy. "Recently. 6 months ago in childbirth." Marco's hands clenched into fists on the table. "She wanted this baby so much. We tried for years, and when we finally—" He stopped, shaking his head. "She never even got to hold him." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, continuing to soothe Matteo with gentle movements. "What was her name?" "Isabella." "Isabella," Sophia repeated, testing the name. "She must have been extraordinary to capture your heart." Something twisted in Marco's chest. No one had spoken about Isabella like that, as a person, not just a tragedy. His family, his men, they all treated her death like a business loss, something to move past efficiently. "She was," he said quietly. "She was everything good in my world. And now you're trying to be everything for him," Sophia said, nodding toward Matteo. "But you're drowning in grief, and he can feel it. Babies need stability, routine, calm energy. They need to feel safe." "I can protect him," Marco said, his voice hardening. "I can give him everything." "Except peace," Sophia interrupted gently. "Money can't buy that. Mr. Santangelo, power can't either." Marco wanted to argue to assert his authority, but Matteo chose that moment to make a soft, contented sound, the first peaceful noise Marco had heard from his son in weeks. "How are you doing that?" he asked, wonder creeping into his voice. Sophia smiled, the expression transforming her tired face into something luminous. "I'm not doing anything special. I'm just present. Calm. Sometimes that's all they need." As if to prove her point, Matteo's eyes began to drift closed, his tiny body relaxing completely in Sophia's arms. Marco watched in amazement as his son, who hadn't slept for more than 20 minutes at a time in days, settled into what looked like genuine rest. "He's exhausted," Sophia murmured. "Poor little love. He's been fighting sleep because he doesn't feel safe enough to let go." But he feels safe with you, Marco observed, studying her profile as she gazed down at Matteo. A complete stranger. Sometimes strangers are safer, Sophia said quietly. We don't carry the same emotional weight. We're not grieving, not desperate, not afraid of failing. We're just here. Marco felt something shift inside his chest, a loosening of tension he'd carried for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe freely. What's your last name, Sophia? She tensed almost imperceptibly. Does it matter? Everything matters in my world. Then maybe that's part of the problem, she said, meeting his gaze directly. Maybe sometimes the most important things are the ones that don't matter at all. Before Marco could respond, Sophia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and sighed. I have to get back to work. My break is over. You work at the cafe next door. It wasn't a question. Marco made it his business to know everything that happened in his territory. Yes. Sophia began to carefully transfer Matteo back to Marco's arms. He should sleep for a while now. When he wakes up, try feeding him in a quiet room. Just the two of you. And Mr. Santangelo? Marco, he corrected automatically. Marco. His name sounded different in her accent, softer somehow. Take care of yourself too. He needs you healthy and whole. As Sophia stood to leave, Marco felt panic rise in his throat. Wait, what if he starts crying again? Sophia paused, her hand on the back of her chair. Then you comfort him. You're his father. You have everything he needs inside you already. You just have to trust yourself. She walked away before Marco could say another word, leaving him holding his peacefully sleeping son and feeling more off balance than he had since Isabella's death. Through the restaurant's windows, he watched Sophia disappear into the cafe next door, back to her world of fluorescent lights and minimum wage. But something had changed in the space between them, something that made Marco's carefully ordered life suddenly feel insufficient. For the first time in months, Matteo slept through the night, and for the first time in months, so did Marco. Sophia should have known that helping Marco Santangelo would have consequences. She'd been working at Cafe Luna for 3 days since the incident at Romano's, trying to pretend that nothing had changed, but everything had changed. The way the other Italian families in the neighborhood looked at her now, with a mixture of respect and curiosity that made her skin crawl. The way her boss suddenly seemed nervous around her, asking fewer questions about Luna's presence during shifts. And then there was Marco himself. He'd appeared at the cafe counter that morning like a vision from another world, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, his white shirt open at the collar, revealing that tantalizing glimpse of tattoo, his platinum Rolex catching the early sunlight streaming through the windows. Every conversation in the small cafe had stopped the moment he walked in. Coffee, he'd said simply, his dark eyes finding Sophia behind the counter. Black. Sophia's hands had trembled slightly as she poured, hyper-aware of every customer's stare, every whispered conversation. When she'd set the cup in front of him, their fingers had brushed for just a moment, and the jolt of electricity that shot through her had been impossible to ignore. How's Matteo? She'd asked quietly. Better. He slept. Marco's voice had been softer than she remembered, less commanding. Thank you. That had been 4 hours ago. Now, as Sophia finished her shift and prepared to collect Luna from the storage room, she found Marco still there, nursing his 3rd cup of coffee and working on a laptop that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. You're still here, she observed, settling Luna in her carrier. Marco looked up, and Sophia caught her breath at the exhaustion in his eyes. Despite Matteo's improved sleep, Marco himself looked like he hadn't rested in years. I like the coffee, he said, which they both knew was a lie. Cafe Luna served decent coffee, but nothing that would keep a man of Marco's refined tastes coming back. Where's Matteo? With my mother. She insisted on watching him while I handled some business. Marco closed his laptop and studied Sophia's face. You look tired. I'm always tired. Sophia adjusted Luna's blanket, avoiding his gaze. It comes with the territory. How old were you when you had her? The question was casual, but Sophia sensed the calculation behind it. 23. And her father? Sophia's spine stiffened. Not in the picture. By choice or circumstance? Does it matter? Sophia echoed his words from their first meeting, but there was steel in her voice now. Marco leaned back in his chair, and Sophia caught a glimpse of the dangerous man beneath the concerned father facade. In my experience, everything matters, especially when it comes to the safety of people I care about. You don't care about me, Sophia said quickly. You don't even know me. I know you risked your job to help a stranger's child. I know you have wisdom beyond your years and hands that can calm a storm. I know you're running from something, and I know you're scared. Marco's voice was quiet, but intense. What I don't know is why. Sophia felt trapped under his scrutiny, like a butterfly pinned to a board. I should go. Sophia. The way he said her name stopped her cold. Have dinner with me. What? Dinner? Tonight? Romano's. Sophia stared at him, wondering if he'd lost his mind. I can't afford Romano's. You wouldn't be paying. I can't accept charity. It's not charity. Marco stood, and Sophia was reminded of how tall he was, how his presence seemed to fill the small cafe. It's a thank you, and maybe the beginning of something else. Mr. Santangelo. Marco. Marco. Sophia took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. I don't think you understand my situation. Then explain it to me. Sophia glanced around the cafe, noting the customers who were still pretending not to listen. Not here. Marco nodded toward the door. Walk with me. Against her better judgment, Sophia found herself following him outside. The afternoon sun was warm on her face, and Luna gurgled contentedly in her carrier, apparently fascinated by the play of light and shadow on the sidewalk. They walked in silence for a few blocks, leaving the bustle of the main street for quieter residential roads, lined with brownstones and small gardens. Finally, Marco spoke. Tell me about Brazil. Sophia's step faltered. How did you... Your accent. The Portuguese you spoke to Mateo. The way you move, like you're still learning to navigate this city. Marco's voice was matter-of-fact. How long have you been here? 2 years. The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. Legally? Sophia stopped walking, turning to face him. Why does that matter to you? Because if you're in trouble, I can help. And what would you want in return? Sophia's voice was sharp with suspicion. Nothing's free in this world, especially not help from men like you. Marco's expression darkened. What kind of man do you think I am? The kind who owns restaurants and wears watches that cost more than most people's cars. The kind who makes other men nervous just by walking into a room. The kind who... Sophia stopped herself before she said too much. The kind who would hurt you? Marco's voice was dangerously quiet. The kind who would own me, Sophia whispered. The words hung in the air between them like a physical thing. Marco's hands clenched at his sides, and for a moment Sophia saw the violence he was capable of flash across his features. Who hurt you? He asked, and his voice carried the promise of retribution. Sophia shook her head, stepping back. This is exactly why I can't have dinner with you. I can't be in your world, Marco. I can't afford the attention, the questions, the protection, the complications. Sophia adjusted Luna's carrier, using her daughter as a shield between them. I have to think about her. Everything I do, every choice I make, it affects her. I can't take risks. And you think I'm a risk? I think you're the biggest risk I've ever encountered, Sophia said honestly, and that terrifies me. Marco studied her for a long moment, and Sophia felt like he was seeing straight through to her soul. What if I told you that you and Luna are safer with me than without me? I'd say that's exactly what a dangerous man would say. To her surprise, Marco smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. You're not wrong, but Sophia. He stepped closer, and she caught his scent, expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely masculine. I'm not the only dangerous man in this neighborhood, and word is already spreading about the woman who calmed Marco Santangelo's son. Sophia's blood ran cold. What does that mean? It means you're already in my world, whether you want to be or not. The only question is whether you'll let me protect you while you're here. Sophia's worst fears materialized 3 days later in the form of 2 men in cheap suits and federal badges. She was in the middle of the lunch rush When they walked into Café Luna, their eyes scanning the room with the methodical precision of predators, Sophia's hands went cold around the coffee pot she was holding, and she had to force herself to keep moving, to act normal, even as panic clawed at her throat. "Sophia Mendoza?" The taller agent approached the counter, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet café. "Yes?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We need you to come with us." The coffee pot slipped from Sophia's nerveless fingers, shattering on the floor and sending hot liquid splashing across her shoes. In the storage room, Luna began to cry as if sensing her mother's terror. I need to get my daughter," Sophia stammered. "Mom, please step away from the counter. My baby is in the back room, please, just let me—" "Now, ma'am." Sophia's legs felt like water as she moved around the counter, every eye in the cafe following her movement. This was it. This was how it ended. 2 years of careful invisibility, of building a life for Luna, destroyed in an instant. "Please," she whispered as they flanked her. "My daughter needs me. She's just a baby." "Child Services will be contacted," the second agent said without emotion. Sophia's world tilted. They were going to take Luna. They were going to separate them, send Sophia back to Brazil while her daughter disappeared into the American foster system. The thought made her knees buckle. Wait. The voice that cut through the chaos was calm, authoritative, and utterly familiar. Sophia turned to see Marco standing in the cafe doorway, and for a moment she thought she might be hallucinating. He looked like an avenging angel in his dark suit, his presence immediately shifting the energy in the room. "Gentlemen," Marco continued, stepping into the cafe with the confidence of a man who owned the world, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." The taller agent's expression hardened. "Sir, this is federal business. I'm going to have to ask you to step back." Marco smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. "Agent Rodriguez, isn't it? I think you'll find that Ms. Mendoza's immigration status is currently under review by my attorney. Perhaps you should check your files again." Sophia stared at Marco in shock. How did he know the agent's name? How did he know about her case when she'd never told him her last name? Agent Rodriguez pulled out his phone, stepping away to make a call. His partner kept his hand near his weapon, clearly uncomfortable with Marco's presence, but uncertain how to proceed. "Marco," Sophia breathed, "what did you do?" "What I should have done 3 days ago," he replied quietly, his eyes never leaving the agent's. "Protected you." Agent Rodriguez returned, his expression frustrated. "There seems to be some confusion in our system. We'll need to verify the paperwork." "Of course," Marco said smoothly. "I'm sure you understand that Ms. Mendoza has rights, including the right to legal representation before any questioning. My attorney will be happy to facilitate a meeting once all the proper documentation is in order." The agents exchanged glances, clearly outmaneuvered but unwilling to admit it. "We'll be back," Rodriguez said finally. "I'm sure you will," Marco replied. "Have a pleasant afternoon, gentlemen." After they left, the cafe erupted in whispered conversations. Sophia stood frozen in the middle of it all, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. "Sophia." Marco's voice was gentle now, concerned. "Are you all right?" She turned to look at him, this man who had somehow materialized exactly when she needed him most, and felt something crack open in her chest. "How?" she whispered. "We need to talk. Privately." Marco glanced around the cafe, noting the curious stares. "Get Luna. I'll take you somewhere safe." Sophia wanted to argue to maintain her independence, but the terror of the last few minutes had stripped away her defenses. She nodded numbly and went to collect her daughter, who was still crying in the storage room. "Shh, meu amor," she whispered, lifting Luna from her carrier. "Mama's here. Everything's going to be okay." But even as she said the words, Sophia wasn't sure she believed them. Marco's car was a sleek black Mercedes that probably cost more than Sophia would make in 5 years. The leather seats were soft as butter, and the interior smelled like expensive cologne and power. Sophia clutched Luna tightly as Marco drove through the city, her mind racing with questions she was afraid to ask. They ended up at a penthouse apartment in Tribeca, all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern art. Sophia felt like Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole as Marco led her inside. Luna quiet now but wide-eyed at the unfamiliar surroundings. "Sit," Marco said, gesturing to a cream-colored sofa that probably cost more than Sophia's annual rent. "I'll get you some water." Sophia perched on the edge of the cushion, afraid to fully settle into such luxury. When Marco returned with a glass of water and a bottle for Luna, she finally found her voice. "How did you know?" she asked. "About the agents? About my case? How did you know any of it?" Marco sat across from her, his expression serious. "I had you investigated." Sophia's blood ran cold. "You what?" "The moment you walked into Romano's, I knew you were different. Special. And in my world, special things need protection." Marco leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. "I needed to know what I was dealing with. So you invaded my privacy. You dug into my life without my permission." Sophia's voice was rising, anger cutting through her fear. "You had no right." "I had every right," Marco interrupted, his voice hardening. "The moment you touched my son, the moment you showed kindness to my family, you became my responsibility. And I protect what's mine." "I'm not yours." Sophia stood abruptly, Luna fussing in her arms. "I'm not anyone's. I didn't ask for your protection or your interference or your—" "Your immigration status expired 18 months ago," Marco said quietly, and Sophia's words died in her throat. "You entered the country on a tourist visa while pregnant. The father of your child was abusive. There are police reports from São Paulo. You fled Brazil with nothing but the clothes on your back and a prayer." Sophia sank back onto the sofa, feeling exposed and vulnerable. "You know everything." "I know enough." Marco's voice softened. "I know you're brave and strong and that you've been carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders for too long. I know you work 2 jobs to pay for a 1-room apartment in Queens and that you haven't bought yourself new clothes in over a year because every penny goes to Luna." Tears burned Sophia's eyes. "Why? Why do you care?" Marco was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "Because when I look at you, I see someone worth saving, and it's been a long time since I believed anyone was worth saving." "I can't pay you back," Sophia whispered. "Whatever this costs, whatever favors you had to call in, I can't repay that kind of debt." "I'm not asking you to." "Then what are you asking for?" Marco stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "Stay here tonight. Let me make sure you're safe while my attorney handles the immigration situation." "Marco." "One night, Sophia. That's all I'm asking for. One night where you don't have to look over your shoulder or wonder if tomorrow is the day they come for you." Sophia looked around the luxurious apartment, then down at Luna, who was gazing up at her with trusting brown eyes. The smart thing would be to refuse, to maintain her independence, to keep running as she'd been doing for 2 years. But she was so tired of running, so tired of being afraid. "One night," she agreed quietly. Marco turned from the window, and the relief in his expression was unmistakable. One night. But even as Sophia said the words, she suspected that one night would change everything. Sophia woke to the sound of Luna's soft babbling and sunlight streaming through windows that offered a view of the Manhattan skyline. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The bed was too soft, the sheets too fine, the silence too complete. Then memory flooded back. The ICE agents, Marco's intervention, the agreement to stay one night in his penthouse. Sophia sat up quickly, checking the time on her phone. 7 a.m. She'd slept for 10 hours straight, the longest stretch of uninterrupted rest she'd had since Luna was born. Luna was awake in the portable crib Marco had somehow procured overnight, gurgling happily at the play of light on the ceiling. Sophia lifted her daughter, marveling at how refreshed she felt, how clear her mind was after proper sleep. "Good morning." "Beautiful," she whispered, kissing Luna's forehead. "Did you sleep well in our fancy palace?" The smell of coffee and something delicious drifted from the kitchen, and Sophia followed her nose, padding barefoot across marble floors that were probably worth more than everything she owned. Marco stood at the stove, still wearing his dress shirt from yesterday, but with the sleeves rolled up and the collar open. He was making what looked like eggs Benedict with the kind of casual expertise that suggested this wasn't his first time cooking breakfast for guests. "You didn't have to do this," Sophia said softly. Marco turned, and Sophia's breath caught at the sight of him in the morning light, hair slightly mussed, stubble shadowing his jaw, those dark eyes warm with something that made her stomach flutter. "I wanted to," he said simply. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months." Sophia settled Luna in the high chair that had also appeared overnight. "You've been busy." "I made some calls." Marco plated the eggs with restaurant-quality precision. "Your immigration hearing has been postponed pending review of new evidence. My attorney is confident we can get your status adjusted." Sophia stared at him. "Just like that?" "Just like that." Marco set a plate in front of her, and Sophia's mouth watered at the sight of perfectly poached eggs and hollandaise sauce. "You're not going anywhere, Sophia. Not unless you want to." The casual way he said it, as if moving mountains was as simple as making breakfast, reminded Sophia of exactly who she was dealing with. "What did this cost you?" "Nothing I wasn't willing to pay." "That's not an answer." Marco sat across from her, his expression growing serious. Some favors called in, some pressure applied in the right places, some donations made to certain political campaigns. He met her eyes directly. "Nothing illegal, if that's what you're worried about." Sophia took a bite of the eggs Benedict, and the flavors exploded on her tongue. Rich, complex, perfect. "This is incredible." "Isabella taught me," Marco said quietly. "She said a man who could cook could take care of himself and the people he loved." The mention of his dead wife created a moment of silence between them. Sophia studied Marco's face, seeing the grief that still lived there, the way his jaw tightened when he spoke her name. "Tell me about her," Sophia said gently. Marco's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Why?" "Because she was important to you. Because she's part of who you are." Sophia adjusted Luna in her high chair, offering her a piece of soft fruit. "Because I want to understand." Marco was quiet for so long that Sophia thought he wouldn't answer. Then slowly, he began to speak. "She was a teacher. Elementary school. She used to say that children were the only honest people in the world. They told you exactly what they thought and felt, without filters or agendas." His voice was soft with memory. "She wanted kids so badly. We tried for 5 years before she got pregnant with Matteo. She sounds wonderful. She was everything I'm not. Kind, patient, optimistic. She saw good in everyone, even me." Marco's smile was sad. "She used to joke that she was going to civilize me, turn me into a respectable businessman." "Maybe she did," Sophia said quietly. "Maybe that's why you helped me yesterday, because she taught you to see the good in people." Marco's eyes met hers across the table, and Sophia felt that familiar jolt of electricity. "Or maybe you did." Before Sophia could respond, the sound of a baby crying echoed through the apartment. Marco was on his feet instantly, moving toward the sound with the kind of urgency that spoke of months of sleepless nights. He returned carrying Matteo, who was red-faced and fussing despite his father's attempts to soothe him. Sophia felt her maternal instincts kick in immediately. "May I?" she asked, extending her arms. Marco hesitated for just a moment before transferring his son to Sophia's embrace. Matteo's cries quieted almost immediately, his dark eyes focusing on Sophia's face with recognition and trust. "Hello, little prince," Sophia murmured, swaying gently. "Did you miss me?" "He's been asking for you," Marco said, wonder in his voice. "Every day since that night at the restaurant. He cries until I show him your picture on my phone." Sophia looked up sharply. "You have pictures of me?" "Security footage from the cafe." Marco's expression was almost sheepish. "I may have had it enhanced. You're stalking me. I'm protecting you. There's a difference." "Yes," Marco said firmly. "Stalking is about possession. Protection is about care." Sophia felt Luna tugging at her shirt, demanding attention, and she shifted to accommodate both babies. The sight of her holding both children seemed to affect Marco profoundly. His expression softened, and something vulnerable flickered in his eyes. "You're a natural," he said quietly. "I had good practice." Sophia looked down at Matteo, who was now completely calm in her arms. "He's beautiful, Marco. Isabella would be so proud." "I don't know how to do this without her," Marco admitted, the words seeming to surprise him. "I can run a business, control territory, make men twice my size afraid to breathe wrong, but I can't figure out how to be a father." "You're already being a father," Sophia said gently. "You love him. You protect him. You're learning what he needs. That's all any parent can do." "Is it enough?" Sophia met his eyes, seeing the fear and uncertainty he tried so hard to hide. "It's everything." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Then Matteo made a soft sound, and the spell was broken. "I should go," Sophia said, though the words felt wrong in her mouth. "I need to get to work, and you probably have—" "Stay," Marco said suddenly. "Both of you. Stay here." "Marco, not permanently. Just until your immigration status is resolved. Until we know you're safe." He moved closer, and Sophia could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Please, Sophia, let me take care of you." Sophia felt herself wavering, tempted by the promise of safety, of rest, of someone else carrying the weight for a while. But accepting would mean crossing a line she wasn't sure she could uncross. "What happens when this is over?" she asked quietly. "When my papers are in order and I don't need protection anymore, what happens to us then?" Marco's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her skin with devastating gentleness. "Then we figure out what this is between us. Without the fear, without the desperation, we figure out if what I'm feeling is real. And what are you feeling?" Marco's eyes searched her face, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Like I'm alive again for the first time since Isabella died. Like maybe there's still good in this world worth fighting for." Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. "Marco." "Stay," he whispered, leaning closer. "Please stay with me." And looking into his eyes, holding his son in her arms while her own daughter played contentedly nearby, Sophia realized she was already lost. "Okay," she breathed. "I'll stay." Years later, Sophia stood in the kitchen of their Hamptons house, watching through the window as Marco pushed 3-year-old Matteo on the swing set, while Luna, now 4, demanded her turn with all the imperious authority of a future queen. The afternoon sun caught the gold in Marco's wedding ring, the same ring he'd placed on her finger 2 years ago in a ceremony that had been equal parts fairy tale and family reunion. "Mama, Daddy says dinner's ready," Luna called, bursting through the back door with grass stains on her dress and joy radiating from every pore. "Then we better not keep him waiting," Sophia laughed, wiping her hands on her apron. The dining room table was set for 5. Marco had insisted on keeping Isabella's place setting, a gentle reminder that love didn't diminish when it was shared. It multiplied. Matteo chattered about his day at preschool while Luna announced her plans to become a doctor princess astronaut. And Marco listened to both with the kind of patient attention that still made Sophia's heart flutter. "What are you thinking about?" he asked later, as they cleaned up together in comfortable domesticity. "How different everything is," Sophia admitted. "How scared I was of you in the beginning." Marco pulled her into his arms, and she could feel his smile against her hair. "You belong to me now," he murmured, the words that had once terrified her now a promise of safety, of love, of home. "Yes," Sophia whispered back, "I do." And that's how a single mother's courage changed everything here at Passion and Power. Sometimes the most dangerous men have the most tender hearts waiting to be discovered. If this story made your heart race, smash that like button and subscribe for more forbidden romance. Share your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing from our amazing community. Until next time, keep believing in love.